Welcome everyone. This is the University of Exeter's Future of Work Industry Experts Forum. And we have an excellent panel of speakers who will be giving us a great insight into their perspective of the world of work in just a few seconds, and I'll go through the introductions shortly. But just to give you some context of what the Future of Work Spring program is, I'll just give you a bit of information if you're unfamiliar with this program of activity. Matt, could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so the Future of Work Spring program, as it suggests, is running through the whole of this spring term. It's an opportunity for our students to experience a range of experiential learning programs, employer webinars, forums like this, skill sessions, and other virtual experiences. It will culminate with a global hackathon, and that will be at the end of the term, running into the vacation. And that will be an exciting opportunity for all of our students to engage with various experts in a range of topics that relate to the future of work and the world of work as it is now. So it will cover issues like globalization and global citizenship, skills and behaviors required for the modern workplace, as well as analysis and exploration of what the working environment looks like now and in the near future. So the obvious benefits are that it's going to provide our students with an understanding of how the world of work is currently changing, because we'll have institutions and students from other institutions. It'll be a fantastic opportunity for our students to increase their intercultural awareness, also engage in interdisciplinary and interactive learning, but obviously gain a real insight into the skills and knowledge required for the workplace. So it's going to be a great opportunity for our students to develop some evidence, real evidence for their CV and job applications. And as part of the whole program, and obviously the aspects of globalization that we're looking at, we'll have live programs and activities that will come from around the world. Speaking of which, our colleagues are currently outside of the UK on the forum, and if we can have the next slide, please, Matt. So I'm briefly just going to run through our expert panel, their names and their titles, and then they're just going to give us an insight into their job roles and the sectors in which they work in. So I'm delighted to say our first panelist is John Kwan, who's the Executive Director of the South East Asian Association of Graduate Employers, but also the Managing Director of his own organization, which is a Kwantum Lead Group. Then we have Satomi Ogata-Knutsen, who is an HR specialist with talent outreach as part of the People and Change Group within the UN Office for Project Services. And then we have Shiva, Susarla, the founder and managing director of RENERGii, and obviously as you'll find out, Shiva is also the founder of many other startups across Asia as well. So as I alluded to, they're not in the UK at the moment. So John is in Singapore, Satomi is in Denmark, and Shiva is also in Singapore. So yeah, a truly international panel. Okay, Matt, if you can take us through to the full screen so we can see our guests and we can start the discussions. Thank you. So, John, did you want to give us an insight into your role and the kind of perspectives of what the world of work means to you?
Yeah, a couple. I wear multiple hats depending on what day it is. So let's talk about one of the key hats. I mean, I spend most of my time as a career coach here in Singapore with my own firm, the Quantum Leap Group, which specializes in working on young people, youth, as I like to say. Here in Singapore, the government defines youth as 35 and below, though it's a pretty wide spectrum, and I kind of usually say the under 40 crowd. So I spend a lot of time working with people like yourselves all around the major universities in Asia, so Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, but also abroad in the UK, France, and Spain. So that's where I spend a lot of my time. But for the last few years, I've been involved with an organization called SEAAGE, the Southeast Asian Association of Graduate Employers. It's a professional association of people that are really focused on early talent yourselves. So recruiters, the employers themselves, the educational institutions, as well as vendors and suppliers who support that. So today my comments are going to come based on working a lot with you guys and also what my members, including the employers, a collective, have to say about stuff. So that's a little of my background.
Excellent. Thank you, John, and welcome. And Satomi, can you give us an insight into your working world?
Yeah, so perhaps that I'm going to start with, I'm pretty much new to working as a HR specialist, talent outreach in the United Nations Office for Project Services. I recently joined in December, and that allows me to relocate from Singapore to Denmark. Prior to that, I was in the talent acquisition position with US software company for the last 9 years. So it's a completely different industry that I have been facing at the moment in the middle of pandemic. Definitely something that I'm learning. So yeah, I mean, in terms of talent acquisition, what it means is basically that we work very closely with internal stakeholders in order to come up with a workforce planning and also to recruit people, but not only in a short-term recruitment, but it's also coming up with a long-term strategy and to see how we can eventually develop the talent within the organization as well. So that's a little bit of gist of like what we do in terms of talent acquisition and also involved with an employer branding and so forth as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Satomi. And Shiva.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I'm in Singapore, so it's evening for us. Hello, everyone. Wonderful to be here. My name is Shiva. I'm the founder of RENERGii here in Singapore. We are an urban circular economy innovation firm. So all the work we do is to build and launch new startups in collaboration with young entrepreneurs and scientists. So that's what we do. We have a bunch of startups that have come out of our studio. Broadly, all our work, the ultimate vision is to reimagine the Asian city as a 000 urban space, zero waste, zero pollution, and zero carbon urban space, and that's what drives us. Very excited to be part of this thought-provoking future of work discussion today. I believe we are at the cusp of a dramatic shift in the future of work. I see collaboration becoming important as never before. I work with a lot of young people and they're super purpose driven. They're always asking me, what purpose are we solving? I never did that in my first job. I just listened to my boss, took my paycheck home. But I see those young people questioning and asking deep questions that I never asked at their age. So it's a very exciting time to be working and to be speculating about the future of work. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Shiva. And as you say, yes, we've got a lot of curious students on this call and who will be participating in the Global Hackathon. So I'm sure all of your expert insights will help them in that journey. Okay, so let's get the discussion underway then. And if I can start with yourself, John, in terms of the pandemic, obviously it's at different stages around the world at the moment, and we're constantly getting more positive news around the vaccines and so on. But from your perspective, what do you think is the most significant impact for your organization and sector in terms of how this current working environment is changing the world of work for yourself and colleagues?
Yeah, if I talk broadly on behalf, and I'll boldly say on behalf of all of my members, which are basically companies large and small based here in Southeast Asia and across the region, I would say if there is one upside to all of this, is that, you know, the last year has really taught people that whatever preconceived notions you had about how things are supposed to be, you can throw those out the window now, right? And I think for a region that's known for being very traditional and a little risk adverse, this was a really good thing. This is a really good thing, right? I mean, the statement I've been using the last year is that, I mean, I think the last year has been an innovator's dream. I think Shiva would definitely agree to that, because like, if you've ever had an idea and someone said, oh no, you can't do that, oh, it's not possible. Well, look, it's possible. We can try, right? And if you've used the year to experiment, which lots of have had to do, I think you're starting to see that, okay, we haven't found the perfect answer, but there are models that could work. This whole lack of trust that sometimes we have here in Asia about, you know, you have to be able to see that person, especially young people. Otherwise, they're goofing off and doing different things. You have to see them, and otherwise, you know, they can't be working from home. That's not true, right? If you have a little trust, right? And yes, there were some cases where people might have exploited those trusts. Let's not, you know, lump all the bad apples and ruin the whole thing. But if you see it like that, then I think there was a lot of upside there. And that has allowed some of the companies that have been a little bit smarter, a little bit more agile, yeah, big and small, to hopefully start to see maybe what could we do, right, about this. On the flip side, I am nervous, especially here in Singapore. If you follow the headlines, we are very fortunate compared to the world's. And there is a chance that maybe we will start to regress back to the old days, because we can. People are now going into the office, not full. We have things like shifts, you know, this week you get group A and the next week group B and things like that. So I'm a little bit nervous that there are some more traditionals that are just hoping that we can just go back, right? But for the forward-thinking ones, that see the last year as not just a temporary thing just to survive, but as an experiment just to try, there's some really cool things coming.
Excellent. Thanks, John. And that's a great summary. And we'll be coming back to some of those issues shortly to explore them further. And Shiva, what do you think has been the most significant impact for yourself and your colleagues in the sector that you're working in?
Fantastic question and great insights from John as well. Absolutely agree. I think what has been remarkable is the resilience my team members and extended ecosystem have shown. The first few days when COVID hit us, and it was, I think, last March or so, it was really intense, and we were all wondering what would happen. But it's incredible how humans respond to crisis, and the resilience our team members have shown. And a lot of our businesses are operationally intensive on the field. We've actually survived and even thrived. So it's and full credit to my colleagues who've sort of responded to the crisis, to the adversity, and actually demonstrated amazing resilience. So for me, the key takeaway, the theme for me for last year is resilience. The interesting dynamic that has come in though is we actually brought in a lot of new team members during COVID. So a lot of our new colleagues, we've never seen them we've never met them and seen them face to face before. So you see this new dynamic where we have to work closely with people, trust them. Like John said, we have to trust them, we have to work closely, cooperate with them, but we've never met them. So it creates new dynamics of trust building, and that as the founder and a sort of quote unquote leader of the firm, that presents new challenges and new forces me to be creative about how we construct the team dynamics and relationships, I think.
That's great. Thanks, Shiva, and really insightful. And it's interesting that you mentioned resilience as being that kind of core attribute that's come to the fore. There was some research by the Institute of Student Employers that came out just before Christmas, and resilience was #1 in terms of the key skill that was in demand. So that's good to hear that there are synergies there. Excellent. Okay, and we'll come back to some of these issues in a few minutes as well. And yeah, and Satomi, from your perspective, you've already alluded to the fact that you have a lot of experience of working in the IT industry. So from your perspective then, is this really a new way of working, or would you regard many of the ways in which we find ourselves working were commonplace with big tech industries prior to the pandemic?
That's a really good question. Based on my experience, I have worked for, the company where I didn't have any business stakeholders on the ground and the face-to-face interactions. I rarely had my manager that is based in Singapore, the location that I lived for the last 10 years. So remote working, remote interaction with the businesses and, your direct hiring manager wasn't really a foreign concept to me, to be honest. Also that being in a position as talent acquisition where that I handle a lot of confidential information. So I used to work maybe twice a week, work from home, and 3 times being in the office. So that used to be the normal, my routine as I work. So it wasn't the foreign concept. However, I think that a lot of tech company, like for example, like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Twitter, and more recently in Spotify, they just announced that they are using remote working as the way of providing a flexible workplace and also the culture. And I think that's a smart move because, everyone has a different need and different walks of their life. So you want to spend a little bit more time with your children before that they goes to bed, but you still want to finish your work. So it gives the employees an opportunity to decide where do they want to work, and also how much or how often that they want to come into the office. And I think that provides more inclusiveness and belongingness as well. So I just think the brilliant concept, and I think that is going to stay in a post-pandemic world, especially in IT or technology sector for sure.
Excellent, thank you, Satomi. That's a really useful insight, and we'll be coming back to some of these issues in a few moments. Thank you. So kind of sticking with the technology angle, I mean, obviously before the pandemic, the world of work and the future of work was already a kind of significant and prominent topic with organizations, and much was given to the opportunities, but also to the threats of what technology was going to provide or take away from the world of work. John and Shiva, it'd be interesting to get your perceptions in terms of what opportunities are being facilitated by the rapid advancement of digital technologies like artificial intelligence and so on, as well as the globalization aspect of how technology is enabling people to reach out to one another. What are your main reflections on this particular aspect of work in terms of the rise of startups and portfolio working, for instance? Do you think this is a trend that's going to continue, or it will plateau or regress? John, if we could start with you first.
I've got some bold views on this kind of stuff here. So let me start with this. I certainly don't have a better crystal ball than anybody else in the world when it comes to what might be coming around the corner and where some of these new opportunities are. But what I do know, and I'm very confident saying this, is that there will be new stuff. And that's been shown in history, right? About technology enabling, and not just tech, but ideas enabling new type of stuff. So, I mean, I'm not that old, although I feel a little bit older these days, but, I studied computer science and mathematics in undergrad. And back then there was not this job called social media coordinator. There wasn't such a job. There wasn't even major platforms where we had the internet, right? So I'm not that old, right? But, there was a job recently where you can just sit and just like tweet stuff and post stuff, and you made a living out of that. And today, now it's TikTok and others, right? So my point there is there's always new stuff coming. Yeah, and technology like AI is certainly accelerating that. But on the flip side, these bold technologies like AI, like machine learning, all these things will also disrupt everybody's job in some form, right? And this is the part that we have not been talking a lot in the last year, right? Before that, there was a lot of talk about AI coming for everybody, right? Yeah, and maybe things are obsolete and all this kind of stuff. And okay, no, it's augmentation, not obsolescence, and all this kind of stuff. But in the last year, it's been on the back burner. But that does not mean people have not been continuing to work on these technologies, right? Yeah, the bots have not stopped working and improving. And what I'm a little nervous is that once we get over this, whenever you think that would be in 2022 and beyond, that this will start to rear its ugly head again really quickly. And there'll be a bit of a, what the hell, we just got over this thing. And now you're telling me I'm going to lose my jobs and the bots are coming and all this kind of stuff. So I think for young people, my advice is that don't be naive about this. They're coming for everybody, young to old, right? AI does not discriminate between your age, your demographics, and what you do. But I think with some smart curiosity and start to talk in some kind of view, you can start to see a little bit of where the winds may be blowing, right? And COVID accelerated some of that, to be honest, right? Some of these industries that are having a big problem, they were going to have the problems anyways. It just accelerated that. So that may have saved you from going down paths that could have been in big trouble, right? What we call sunset industries. But at the same time, interesting things are coming here. And I think my advice is to be curious and start talking to people, because at your age, you won't be able to see this. That's just really hard to do, right? But what you can do is go around and talk to people. And one of the biggest things that you have that's so valuable is you have this card called the student card. You need to flash this everywhere and start waving and say, hey, you know what? I'm just a student. Can I just talk to you? Because I'm curious. I don't know much. I do know a little bit. So you don't want people to spoon feed you, but I would love to hear from you. Shiva, tell me what's going on about smart cities, and is Singapore really on the map? And I'm sure he'll unload, and maybe it'll spark something for you to have other conversations. But this is the way that you can start to be curious instead of waiting for people to tell you, there's the opportunity, start learning this. Oh, you need to pivot here. It'll be too late by then.
Excellent. That's great, John. Thank you. And yes, one of the things that you just reminded me of was LinkedIn, who very recently, did some analysis of the job postings and the job titles that were coming up on the profiles, and they highlighted the fact that the top 10 growth areas of employment and job titles didn't exist 10 years ago. So I just think, that reiterates your point about that you just can't predict what's coming. Absolutely. Thank you. And Shiva, as a serial entrepreneur and, many of the aspects of your area of work are very much at the cutting edge in terms of new employment opportunities. What's your view of this particular issue?
Digitalization and AI is here to stay. So I'll sort of, without repeating what John said, I'll sort of take off and leverage on what he's already said, right? With a slight sort of opportunity canvas type of perspective. We do a lot of work in cities, right? Now, if you see how the city is designed, the city at any given point in time is a reflection of the state of technology of that era, right? The city construct we have currently is because of the automobile, for example, and a certain way of doing work. You can have a home somewhere, you can drive to work, sit in an office and work, and so on. So the point I'm trying to make here is that every aspect of our life, of society, is a reflection of the state of technology during that era. Technology has been changing rapidly in the last 20 years. This kind of a rapid shift in technology is unprecedented. This kind of a rapid diffusion of technology is also unprecedented. All right, so it presents, I think, major opportunities, significant opportunities for people here, for thinking about the future of society, thinking about the future of work, thinking about the future of collaboration, cooperation, food production, urban design, whatever, right? It is a fundamental opportunity to reimagine, question everything, because things are the way they are because they were designed based on a previous era technology. New technology allows you to do things very differently. You don't have to repeat the mistakes of the past, but you can leverage on these opportunities if you can combine creativity, curiosity, like John said, with the technologies of today. Take what is available, blend it with creativity, blend it with curiosity, question why things are the way they are, and forge a new future. That's what I would say. And I think that's where the opportunity is, be it manufacturing, be it food production, be it mobility, built environment, wherever. That's where all the sexy new stuff is emerging.
Excellent. Thank you, Shiva. Yeah, so lots of positive things potentially at the disposal of our students. Okay, right. Well, we've mentioned a lot about resilience and so on, and creativity, and I'm conscious as a kind of career practitioner that there's less of a talk amongst employers about specific technical skills and more about the importance of resilience, emotional intelligence, positive mindset, and mindfulness, and so on. And yeah, I'd like to explore this with Satomi and Shiva, if I may, about the prominence of this in the workplace. Now, do you think that the pandemic and the way in which we're working at the moment means that these attributes will be more or less essential for workers in the post-pandemic world, given the fact that we're likely still to be working from home and at a distance or remote working? And Shiva, if I can come to you first.
It's a great question. I mean, I think there was in general a trend in the workplace, Paul, which required these skills. The pandemic has actually accelerated that. So in my view, the last century was the era of the factory. The last 2 decades was the era of the knowledge worker. I think this and the next 2 decades are going to be the era of the innovators. And innovation is not just about having a technical skill set. Innovation is about presenting a vision, inspiring others, attracting them to your vision, making them participate in it. So it's a much broader set of skill sets that are required to be a successful worker in this era of innovation. What the pandemic has done, it has made some aspects of work even more difficult. So it has increased volatility, it has increased uncertainty about the future. So it brings in, I think, the need to have even more skills. I mean, in innovation, we talk about being a cockroach or a camel or whatever. You know, we sort of draw these analogies between startups and compare them to animals, just to sort of highlight some attributes. In fact, last year, everyone's talking about startups having to be like camels, surviving without water for as many days if required, you know. So that's the kind of, I think, mindset shift that's happening. So it was a trend where because of the general changes in industry, but I think it's accelerated because of the pandemic. If you can't cooperate, if you can't collaborate, if you can't inspire people these days, you're out of work very, very soon.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. And yeah, I'll come back to that towards the end, I think. I like that analogy of moving from the factory work era to the knowledge worker era to the innovator era. I think that's a nice way of summarizing the rapid changes to the world of work. Thank you. And Satomi, so with your background in HR especially, what's your view on the future importance of these attributes like resilience, emotional intelligence, and so on? Do you think they're going to be more or less important as we move through this technological revolution and period of remote working?
Yeah, so definitely John and Shiva, you guys have done, said amazing things in terms of importance of resilience and all that already. So I'm going to talk about from the HR point of view, if I may. I remember when I first started my career as a HR about 10 years ago, my first mentor taught me this: hire for aptitude, fire for attitude. Now, I'm going to break it down to what it means. Now, hire for aptitude means that as a hiring manager or as an employer, we can actually train you to do the technical job. But what we can't train or change is the one's attitude. And I think that strongly resonated with me because in walks of my career that I've seen the people who were like an A player in other organization walks into the new organization and he or she just continue to do their own way, my way or highway, and they weren't collaborative, and unfortunately that they didn't make a cut. And also that also sparks more organization to really focus on interview as a competency-based or behavioral-based interview rather than jobs or skill-based interview over the last years. And definitely, just to build up on the Shiva, definitely that a pandemic has accelerated. Let's just face it, that we all gone through a challenging time, everyone in this room, right? But it's also, when you look at it, that it has given the opportunity for all of us to be more authentic and raw. And also, like, you know, the pandemic situation has been tested many of times for us to be resilient, agile, and adaptable. And also, what can we do to practice our growth mindset? Because if you have a fixed mindset and if you're constantly blaming on a pandemic, you're not going to go anywhere. So I think that definitely stays. And another thing that you know, John and Shiva mentioned about, you know, digitalization and AI, whether you like it or not, it's going to stay. And I agree 100%. But I think that one of the attributes or traits that Paul, that you mentioned, this is something that AI can't reciprocate. Resilient, emotional intelligence and all that, that is something that only human can do. And I think when I think about those digitalization, one of the things that as a human that we crave more on a personal experience, anything that is personalized. And I think that's something that a human, that we can provide that, and that's something that AI can't provide today. And I don't think that they are able to do that. So I know it's a little bit long-winded answer, but absolutely, it's critical.
That's great, and a really important note, I think, for our students to take note of. I think sometimes they associate the competencies of which they're going to be assessed against when they go for their ideal job. It's all about their discipline, or it's all about the technical aspects of their job, when really the vast majority of these competencies are transferable skills. In fact, you're probably more aware than most is that it does irritate some colleagues in recruitment when they're called soft skills. They would rather that they're actually called essential skills. So I think all three of you have made a great point to reinforce that particular fact. Okay, we may come back again to those skills issues as well. I think it'd be remiss of me to not get your insights as well, particularly John and Shiva being based in Southeast Asia, in terms of what your perspective is at the moment in terms of how the labour market is recovering in Southeast Asia. And John, you've already mentioned that you're slightly concerned that there might be a kind of reverting back to pre-pandemic ways of working. I think it'd be useful for many of our students on the call and alumni just to get your insights as to whether you think this is a homogenous kind of experience across the Asia Pacific region, or whether some areas, some regions are recovering quicker than others. John, if I can come to you first for your view.
Definitely not homogeneous. I mean, that's for sure. Hopefully that's an obvious point. I mean, all you need to look is the geopolitical situations, and if you follow any kind of like news story, you're going to kind of see that. I mean, the headlines, everyone's feeling it a little differently, right? Singapore is really fortunate. That's the challenge here, and that's why I get a little nervous here, because just the geographic nature of Singapore makes it so interesting and so special. I mean, it's a little tiny island bordered by other countries, but seem to be protected from everything. Like no natural disasters, right? You go a little bit north, you're getting typhoons, and then you're getting earthquakes. We get nothing here. It's sunny and 30 every day. It's it's like the UK, the same weather, but good weather. Sorry. Yeah, true. Right. So so in that sense, sometimes it's easy just to kind of rest on what's going on now here, right? And although we don't have a lot of natural resources, one of the things that Singapore has is a lot of cash. And the government has done a fortunate job to prop people up by spending a lot of its prudent savings over the years in these kind of extraordinary times. But the same token, you know, this was the term that was thrown around in 2008, 2009, this concept of moral hazard, like, okay, are we just propping up things that really should be dying anyways, and let's get over to the next thing, right? And that's my nervousness in some of the ones that are a little more advanced, like Singapore, maybe Australia, New Zealand, in that sense, as you look up and down, and I mean, China's a beast on its own, so I don't want to comment too much about that. But you know, for the nations who are a little bit better. But if you just go a little bit 1 hour in any direction here into Southeast Asia, you're going to see like a mix of things. And once you look into, again, macro factors like just the political landscape here of the challenges, right? You're going to have to see is this, it's you know, it's going to take some time. But if you look beyond the short-term stuff and you look at the big indicators for economic growth, everything points back to Southeast Asia, right? Everyone knows about China, everyone knows about India as the two largest markets. But once you go beyond that, you'll point yourself here with countries like Indonesia at 250 million people, Vietnam opening up at 100 million people, and you know, others like you know, the Philippines and all that. And once you add it all up, right, they might be small in terms of size, but once you add up the people and then the dollars, you start to see why there's so many headlines about Southeast Asia, or the ASEAN nations, as we call it, that association of the Southeast Asian nations, right? And then even more of the bleeding edge ones, right? They're having some tricky parts right now, right? There's positivity in the medium term and long term there, but it, you know, you have to be kind of bold, and you know, I don't want to keep using the word resilient, but strong enough to kind of, you know, absorb the waves that are going to come hit you in the first few times. Again, here in Singapore, we're very fortunate because we're protected, so we don't get the waves. But if you're a little bit, you know, more bold, a little bit riskier, or potentially you're sitting nearby remotely trying to still pay attention, right? Still engage with what's going on here. Because if you look from afar and you just wait until it's calm and then you try to enter here, that's not going to work. You're going to be too late, right? But there are ways, again, to stay engaged, yeah, and be active about that, so that you know, you're not just waiting, you're already kind of in there. Now, I'm a bit of a contrarian, right? When I see the, you know, buildings burning, I'm not, you know, and people are running out, I'm not necessarily running out. I'm thinking, okay, could it be a good time to come in, right? As long as the building's not going to collapse on itself, if it's just localized in a certain area and eventually it can be there, maybe this is a good time to go. But if you wait for the all clear signal and everyone's rushing back in and then you're trying to get in here, that's going to be a little challenging here. Right? And again, I think as younger people, you have, I'd like to think, a little higher risk tolerance than maybe some of the older people, right? So again, opportunities here, but you've got to understand that it's not just a simple type of thing. There's some complexity to that kind of stuff. But again, the curiosity is so key to me. On top of all the other traits we've talked about, what I like to call the human traits, right? And if you want to stay ahead of the bots, it's the humanity that we got to go. I mean, I have to believe that, you have to believe that. Otherwise, we as a race are kind of in big trouble, right? So if you realize that you need to, I think, on top of the solid, you know, technical academic foundations that you get at higher education, but you on top of that work on these human skills, right? That's a little bit the future proof. When people say, oh, what's the skill? I don't think, and I hopefully you've heard it from the others, that although we're talking a lot about tech, we're not saying you need to be a STEM practitioner. Go do STEM now. Forget about liberal arts. Forget about anything that's, you know, we go do STEM. Take an AI course. I am not saying that at all. And actually, if you're thinking about that, I'd be like, you're a little late, right? Yeah, right? Because the guys that, you know, work with the bots, they have 3 PhDs, not a master's degree, not 1 PhD. They have 3 PhDs. So if you're just getting a master's degree, you're the one, you know, getting coffee for those guys, right? Yeah. So how do you stay ahead of the game? Again, human skills, because we're complex, right? Yeah, humans don't make rational decisions, right? I mean, if we were rational decision makers, the world will look a little different than it looks today. And as long as you understand that we're complex and you can maybe do a bit better at trying to understand that, then that's how you could be very useful at all ages, right? That's a little bit of what she was talking about, innovation, as far as I'm concerned. And if you want a technical term, I would call it design thinking. I'm a big jumping on the design thinking bandwagon over the last 5-6 years here, things like that. Humans searching first to really understand. You don't have to come up with bold stuff. You just got to understand why people do things, how people do things, because it's not one thing for sure. And that's going to make me useful for, I think, in perpetuity, right? Otherwise, we're in big trouble. Elon Musk has something to say about that, I know. Yeah, but I'm not on his wavelength, so.
That's great. Thank you, John. Thanks very much for that. And Shiva, do you share similar perspectives as John?
Oh yes, indeed. I think economies are going to bounce back to pre-pandemic levels this year. At least that's the expectation. Southeast Asia is big on construction and real estate, right? It's a big driver of the economy, and obviously that's gotten hit. And we don't know what's going to happen with that space. But the other sectors have exploded. E-commerce is one example. It's just, I don't know if you're following the numbers, exploded in Southeast Asia. And all the related services and ecosystem around it. So there's a huge influx of experts, programmers, entrepreneurs, innovators who are going into that space. There's a lot of digitalization, data center, application development happening. So a lot of new jobs also have been created, Paul. So some jobs have been lost, especially in the unorganized sector. I think they've been hit badly, but hopefully they'll be back at work this year. But broadly, I think the region has stayed resilient. We expected massive job losses, absolute. There was all this doomsday conversations going on early last year. But if you see, economies have stayed resilient. Yes, they've shrunk a little bit, but they've stayed resilient. They've been operating. There's been no mass collapse of economies. There's no chaos. So I think it's great. In fact, what's happened is that a lot of big spenders, banks, big companies, investors have been holding back, been very cautious. So they have a lot of money to spend in the next 2-3 years, and they're going to deploy it very aggressively. So it's a great opportunity. It's a great time to be actually in my space, in the innovation space right now in this part of the world.
Excellent. Thank you, Shiva, and thank you, John. So lots of positive perspectives coming out there that are hopefully going to provide lots of reassurance for our students. Okay, and I'm just going to come back to Satomi now in terms of looking at the nature of work itself and some of the more nuanced issues that employers are currently looking at, and particularly the issue of equality, diversity, inclusion, and its importance within an organisation. And I know this is close to your heart, Satomi, and would you like to give us an insight in terms of the kind of measures organisations are pursuing in this regard, and give us some insight to the value that they bring to an organisation?
Yeah, sure. So that's a really good question, and it definitely that is close to my heart. Now that I can definitely talk about and some of the examples that I can share with you, especially in the area of recruitment and talent acquisition practices. Now, why that organization values diversity, diversity and inclusion, simply because of like diversity recruitment like really provides many tangible benefits for performance, innovations, and productivity. Like, for example, like things like broader range of skills and experiences that people would bring on the table, generating new ideas, increase languages capability, and raising culture awareness, and so forth. And from the talent acquisition perspective, that it opens up a lot more larger candidate pipeline. Now, when it comes to equality and inclusion, well, let's just face it, everyone in this room agree with me that we would rather work for a company and have colleagues and your manager actually values you and actually give you a high five and saying like, oh, you did a good job, rather than constantly being harassed, discriminated based on your race or the gender or the sexual orientation or the language that you speak. So that's why that it is important for HR practitioner like us to really look at like what is EDI. Now, in terms of the measurement that you ask, one of the things that I can think on the top of my head when it comes to measurement is really about first that the measurement that we do is we have a two thing. It's basically the company or organization, the readiness level. So what I mean by that is, are our people ready and actually aware of EDI issues? what are we going to do about it? What would be the objectives? So, for example, one of the things that we have done in the past would be, keeping unconscious bias in check, because as a human, that we are all wired with bias, and especially when it comes to unconscious bias. So one of the things to mitigate that and the measurement that we have done is providing like a blind resume. So the blind resume is something that is a black out the certain information, whether it's a gender or whether it's a race, whether it's the location, whether it's the salary, whether it's which company that they come from, to really provide those hiring managers to build up a short list based on what they see on the resume, that it's very consistent across the board. And you'd be surprised that they do provide different results in terms of shortlisting of the candidates. We've seen a lot of hiring managers that they build more shortlisting because of the blind resume. And they also started realizing that how unconscious bias that is played in their candidate assessment phases as well. In terms of hard measure is something like in the talent acquisition would it be the most common practice that we have is really about gender parity. So one of like KPI that I had in the past would be something like how many applicants are female and what percentage of shortlisted candidate who has gone through the interview would have been a female, and also how many people have we managed to recruit that are female in order to bring up the gender parity in organizations. And this is because of the Future Work Forum in 2020 and 21 and beyond. I do believe that there's a lot of more companies and organizations that they would be measuring things like races, people with disability, sexual orientations. I know that some of the companies that has started doing it, but that would be something that brings more in depth of this EDI initiatives.
Excellent, thank you, Satomi. And I think that would be really useful, not just generally for our students to understand how this is integrated into the recruitment program and things like blind applications and CVs and so on, but also I suspect this is going to be quite a hot topic as part of the Global Hackathon towards the end of this term as well. So thank you for that insight. Okay, so conscious of time, and I think what will be on the minds of many of our students, and we had a question particularly from Ollie, one of our alum, as part of the registration process, which was, how much do you think the current online working environment is here to stay? And John, all the panelists have given an insight into a certain perspective in this regard. But yeah, it's how much do you see as retaining this level of work and working environment and remote working, and how much do you see as returning back to pre-pandemic styles of work? Shiva, can I start with you, please, and then come on to John?
Awesome, it's a great question. Thanks, Ollie, for asking that. I've spoken to a lot of employers in the last year or so, especially in the knowledge space, right? You know what all of them are telling? They're saying productivity has actually gone up. People are sitting at home working longer hours. Productivity has gone up. The employers actually don't mind this. It's cheaper for them that the colleagues are sitting at home working harder than they would if they went to office, and then they save on the office expenses as well. So the employers are loving it, right? I love it for a personal reason. I think it's been the greatest equalizer of our times. It has removed the metropolitan premium, the advantage that urbanites existed. People in Bombay, Jakarta, Beijing, Shanghai had a massive advantage in the workforce over people from the tier 2, tier 3 towns. online working culture has removed that, or at least reduced that metropolitan advantage. And I think it's amazing because you have access to a larger talent pool. I think the future is going to depend, whether it stays like this or reverts back, is going to be dependent on one thing. It goes back to what John said, what Satomi has been saying, the human experience. We need the human touch, right? And it depends on how technology evolves. Right now, the state of technology doesn't deliver that human experience when you're working remotely. If technology evolves to sort of fulfill that need, I think online is here to stay. So I think that's going to be the key determinant. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks, Shiva. And John, many of our students will, of course, they only be restricted in terms of the amount of work experience they can access at the moment. And I've heard many students comment, sometimes in the national media, that they feel it's a kind of second-hand experience, having an internship that's virtual and through this medium. What would your response be in terms of reassuring them that how this might be relevant to the world of work?
Yeah, I mean, certainly no one's thinking that the current situation is optimal, right? And although I'm optimistic too, I will layer some practicality. Not everybody thinks it's been better, right? Like Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, came out to say that actually no, productivity's gone down, right? And especially the young guys, you need to get back in the office. I think part of that is because he spends a lot of money for rent, so he doesn't want those offices to be empty. So I think there's a little bit bias there, but assuming his numbers are legit, right? I mean, I'm thinking that the upside isn't necessarily online or not. It's not a binary situation. I think there's going to be a lot more mixed modes of working, and we're going to have to figure it all out, right? And actually, that's not new. A lot of the modes that we've been seeing in the last year are not new, right? Satomi's already told you she's been working, you know, again, when you have an American company, you've got these outposts, you're the last person they care about. So she's been working remote, hasn't seen her boss maybe once a year, right? 20 years ago, I was using virtual technologies with my coworkers a long time ago. So this is not new. Working from home, you know, people that only work remotely, we've all had them, but exception basis, right? So on the upside, I think now everybody's had to be a little bit more aware and open-minded to those, because sometimes those who had exceptions were sometimes outcasts or kind of, you know, seen as why are they getting such special treatment? But now that everybody's gone through that, and again, staying at home is not necessarily good. Not everybody has the opportunity to have big open spaces, you know, where you can have a way to separate all that kind of stuff. So it's not all rosy, but I think the fact that we've seen that it can be working and we will evolve that, I can't see anybody saying it's 5 days in the office like we used to be. I just can't see that happening. Just on bottom line, right? If we just go practicality, dollars and cents, right? It's expensive to have office spaces. It's expensive. So you're not going to necessarily, you know, get away from the office spaces, but maybe again, a mixed mode where the office spaces are less footprints, or maybe we, instead of having one big office in the central part of town, we have satellite offices now where you can kind of drop in there, right? Which again, as a management consultant, I've been working under that mode for over 20 years. So there's a lot of things out there that's been there. I think just more mainstream, and it's not just for certain industries anymore. Everybody's going to be looking at and adopting it. And again, the key is the open-mindedness, not the jealousy. How come you get to do this? Oh, how come just because you have children, you get an exception? I'm young, I should allow that. I get that, right? Yeah. But I think if we can be more inclusive about that, I think that's going to be cool. And crazy new modes, this concept of portfolio careers that you know, Paul mentioned a little briefly. I know we have a link out to some stuff that I was talking about last year, where you don't have necessarily one job, but what if you're working 3 jobs at the same time with 3 different employers, right? And I'm not talking about gig. That's a different concept that's around, but I don't see that as a long-term. I'm talking about concepts where you want to do 3 different things with 3 different employers because you are multi-talented, you have multiple interests, right? And you don't want to be boxed in, because jobs of today and the past were well-defined, right? Boxes. And human beings are irregular polygons. So to fit yourself into these square boxes, you usually have to compromise, chip away. But what if you could build your custom bespoke job that fits all your nooks and crannies and interests and cut away the stuff that you don't need? I think that will be there. Yeah, it will take some work. There's no doubt about it. No one's going to hand it to you. But if you get excited about it and you see how you're going to get there, and it's not something you can get tomorrow, okay? This is not something that's coming tomorrow. But I think in the short term, 3 to 5 years, I think you're going to see this. People are already doing it. Hello, I'm doing it today. I started by telling you I wear multiple hats. Today, I'm wearing 2 at the same time. Usually it's 1 at a time, but today I'm trying to speak from both, and I even have third hats too, right? That I'm not talking about. So people are pioneering this stuff. It'll become mainstream, right? But you got to work. You can't sit. It's not going to show up on some job posting, right? And I think it starts with curiosity. If you are curious, right, and you get out there and you connect with people, trust, right? That's the underlying word for me. If you're good at developing trust with people, trust, yeah, trumps everything. If I trust you, I don't care if you're not here. I don't care if you have a visa issue. I don't care if you don't really speak the local language. I don't care if you have a criminal background, but I trust you. I know you can do this. Let's make this work, right? Yeah. And I think sometimes because of things like skills and technology, people just focus on the output, but there's way more here, right? We have to go a little bit old school to get into the new stuff in the future.
Excellent. Thank you, John. And I'm conscious of time, and yeah, it's I feel we could talk at least another hour on just soft skills and attributes and the value of humanity as you described it, John, and Shiva, you was talking about obviously the importance of resilience, and I think as well you mentioned the importance of trust that you've noticed is absolutely being core as well within your teams. That echoes many of the sentiments that John's referred to. And Satomi, yeah, it's the value of diversity and creativity. I think sometimes people see it quite purely as a politically charged issue, and they don't always recognize how organizations genuinely value the mix and the creativity that having a diverse workforce brings to the organization. So I think that was absolutely an excellent opportunity for our students to hear from your perspectives, and I think we've had a great range of topics from your different perspectives that will be invaluable for our students, not just throughout this Future of Work program and the Global Hackathon, but in their future lives. So thank you. My sincere thanks to you all. You've been absolutely brilliant. Okay, so before we say our formal goodbyes, I just want to kind of wrap this up and make everyone aware of what's still to come as part of the spring program. So thank you, Matt. Covering many of the issues that we've just described, actually, the next program that we've got on that you might be interested in is on the left-hand side. You can see that we've got a digital assessment centre. If you're not already aware, according to the Institute of Student Employers, 97% of employers now move their selection practice and digital assessment centres entirely online. So, you know, this is a really unique opportunity to have an authentic experience and get an insight into the world of work and how employers are currently recruiting through digital means. So, you know, it's risk-free and it'll prepare you immensely for the assessment centres that might lead to your ideal job. So that's happening on the 4th of March. So do check that out. We have a recording of the previous session last week of our Industry Leaders Forum. That's available on the Future of Work website that you can see at the bottom left-hand corner. So do check that out. And don't forget, we've got a huge number of interactive programs coming your way for the remainder of the spring, as well as the Global Hackathon. And don't forget also, this is in addition to all of the rich variety of career development support that you can get through the Career Zone as well. So again, thank you not just to our speakers, but to Emily and Matt in the background, and my colleague Danny Bourne, who's been supporting us in terms of bringing this program together. But again, I'd just like to finish on saying thank you to our expert panel, Shiva, John, and Satomi, for an excellent kind of insight into the future of work. And with that, I'd just like to wish everyone a fantastic day. Thank you very much.